I like to make a point about this. When I played the Brahms B-flat concerto, the Boston Symphony, Leonard Bernstein was a student at Harvard, and I knew him. And he came to the concert, and afterwards he came backstage, gave me a big hug and said, "Frank, you outdid yourself." I thought to myself, what a dumb remark. How could you outdo yourself? But in this recording, I realized there is such a thing as being outside of your skin and outdoing yourself. And then what happened was this. At first I thought they faked it by revving up the thing to make it more brilliant than I actually played it. But I have reviews from European capitals which prove that I did play them fast. But what happened in this recording is that Emery Cook made me do it over and over and over again because he was experimenting with sound and where he was placing his microphones and all. And so from morning till night, I did it over and over. And as the more I did it, the easier the action seemed to get to me. And I didn't realize it was getting faster and faster. And I think we were there till 11 o'clock at night at least. And I was getting tired and I was getting annoyed that he wanted me to do it over and over again some more. Because I thought it's okay, why don't we let it go? Well, no, I want to do it. So I was beside myself in a way, and I just, you know, I'm just lucky it came out as well as it did. But it's the only time in my life I ever played it that fast, because it was the end of a day long of doing it over and over and over again. And fortunately, the action of the piano wasn't too stiff, so it was possible.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's a couple other things to note. And you know, you notice how Frank talks about the piano a lot. And you should know that he is the only pianist to ever play in Carnegie Hall and tune the piano for himself before the concert.
Well, that was because the tuners were on strike. I wouldn't do it as a gimmick. I was a certified graduate of the New York Trade School, which Steinway sent me when I told them I wanted to study piano technology at their school. Well, they supported, they and Baldwin supported the New York Trade School Piano Crafts Department, where otherwise they taught sign painting, auto mechanics, air conditioning, and all that. And we rented Carnegie Hall for a certain date, and it just happened that within a 2-week period, in which I was playing, the tuners were on strike. And I went to Steinway's and I said, now, I have a friend who went to school with me who was a very good tuner. The only trouble is his father's in the union that's on strike. They said, don't let him do it. And they said, you have a choice. You can play on an untuned piano, you can cancel the concert, or tune it yourself. Well, by then I had already invested some money in the rental of the hall, and advertising and all that. And so I decided, well, I'll do it myself. So I went to the basement, and there was only one man there, Bill Huffer, who was in charge of more action regulating than tuning. And so I tuned the piano in the basement the day before I played. The next day they moved it to Carnegie Hall, and of course I had to tune it again when I should have been practicing Gaspard and Ennui and Stravinsky Sonata and a few other pieces. Beethoven 110 and Paganini Brahms variations. In any case, I did tune it on stage. And then that evening, just to check the unisons, and I didn't want the audience members to know that I was the one who was going to be playing, I put on my coat and I walked on stage. And some people were there just to check on the unison. Well, there were 3 Steinway tuners on strike sitting in the front row to see if I could really, what kind of a tuning that was going to be. But nobody ever complained about it. And mentioned that it was not out of tune. And so, yeah, I did it too, in order to know about the construction of the piano. You had to go through the whole thing. I can tell you another anecdote about this. This is rather interesting. When I applied for the course, I was told by the superintendent, you can't come because it was the end of January. Classes start next week on Monday, and the class is full. I said, but I've got it. He said, come back in September. I said, I can't come back in September. Just got out of the Army, where I spent 32 months, 22 months overseas. I'm getting ready to play at Carnegie Hall, if I go out into the world, I can't come out back again and go out again. I've had enough of that, so I gotta go now. He said, I'm sorry, the thing is full. And so I discovered there's a way of being persistent without being unpleasant about it. I just stood still. I didn't say a word. I just stood there. My feet were like glued to the floor at the New York Trade School in front of the superintendent. I didn't know what to do because if I went home, I knew it was over for me. I never would have this camp that I needed in my study of piano technique to know what really worked, how the piano worked as an instrument machine. So I didn't know what to do. I just stood there. I waited, waited, waited. Finally, he decided to get me off his back. He said, well, you have to pass an aptitude test anyway. I'll call the teacher down, who had used to tune for Joseph Hoffman on tour now. So he came down in his apron that he'd been working with students. What can I do for you? So I told him about 6 reasons why I needed to do this. He said, best sales talk I ever heard. Come up, just to give you a test. So he gave me a test, stand over there, and he played F and A, below middle C. What do you hear? I said, I hear F and A. Well, it's F and A, because I had absolute pitch. But, what do you hear? Wah, 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 wah. Do you hear wah, wah? What is the speed that you hear this beats? And you don't have to count them, just imitate it. I didn't know what he was talking about. So he could have said to me, well, now, Mr. Glazer, when you play at Carnegie Hall, you may turn out to be the greatest pianist ever. Combination of Schnabel, Paderewski, Rachmaninoff, and Horowitz, whatever else. But if you can't hear what I want you to hear, well, you can't be a piano technician. I'd have gone home and said, well, I don't have it. But he understood my need. And he said, tell you what you do. You go back where you live and practice and come back tomorrow, I'll give you another test. Well, I went to my one room and I banged on those 2 notes and I played them softly at least an hour. I know what did he want me to hear. Finally, I began to hear very faint voices that I think string players can hear because they're always tuning their instrument. And so this must be what he wants to hear. So I felt good. Went back next day, passed the test. He said, come to class Monday. I never said to him, Mr. Turner, I hope you didn't kick somebody else out because you took me in. But I was desperate. I needed to go anyway. I thought it's not my business to ask him. And so I never did ask him. We became good friends afterwards. But I never asked him what happened that he took me. I thought if they had 20 students, can't they have 21? The government was paying for it under the GI Bill anyway. I wasn't asking for scholarship money or any favors. And I must say, once I tuned for Serpent too, when he played for friends at the Carlisle Hotel in New York. And they invited me to stay to hear him play, but it was the weekend, and I had to go to Mount Kisco to tune another piano over the weekend, so I couldn't stay. But I was pleased to hear that from Simon Goldberg, who was a performance in the private home in the apartment at the Carlisle Hotel, that Serkin had told him the piano had never been in such good tune since he picked it out at the Steinway factory. So I did pass the test. But that's why I got involved in it. But it was as part of my understanding of what is involved in playing the piano, the technical aspect.
So I want to show you guys, this is a view from my office. And you'll see these stacks here. And these are actually the scores that we haven't cataloged for the stacks. But the reason that I keep them here is I get a call from Frank at least 3 times a year. Chris, I never thought I'd play this again, but have you got it? So I look through my things here, because every one of these scores has Frank's fingerings in it. And so, so long as he's concertizing as much as he is, we need to keep the archive live for him to be able to continue to play with it. You know, and then ultimately these will be absorbed into not our stacks, but rather our archives in the Frank Glazer collection, so that students want to study what his repertoire and how he might have phrased stuff and like that will be able to go to those scores. A couple other things. Frank mentioned GI Bill. Those are just some of the tapes. That's some of the terabytes that we've got there. Frank. Yeah. Amongst the things that Frank gave us are his military records, and they are once again, this is a complete archive. So Frank, was it you or was it Ruth that kept things in folders and like that?
We both did.
Yeah. These guys are seriously organized. So at one point in time, we went out and Frank said, "Would you like my military stuff?" And it comes in a nice archival box, in folders, laying stuff out. And so this is, he had kept a lot of the papers that he grabbed when he was in France. So we have a lot of the papers that he was actually picking up, newspapers, military newspapers. But we also have remarkable things like this, a little matchbox full of the dirt from Omaha Beach, because how many days after the day did you land on Omaha Beach?
11.
11 days. So Frank was in some kind of the mop-up operations.
I didn't pick it up. The British captain who was with us picked it up. And when I saw he had it, I thought, oh, can I have some of that? So he gave me some. And it's historic because the sands at Omaha Beach are not the same as these. Now, with the wash of the ocean coming in all the time.
So, and you worked a lot with kind of community reparations and like that in the war, is that right?
During the war? Well,
Yeah.
No, it was military government. Sometimes the dumbest things happen in the military, and that's how one can say, well, that's how we won the war. The only thing is that probably the enemy made more mistakes than we did. But I was supposed to go into North Africa to interpret as a detective. I was trained to be a detective in the army. And I had spoken German and Italian, so they were going to send me to North Africa to interpret, because there was a lot of thievery going on there, and they needed to have people who could speak these different various languages. Because see, that's where the Germans and the Italians were fighting, the Americans. And so, but as it turned out, I didn't go to North Africa. I went to England to go into France. But if you're listed as an interpreter, you jolly well interpret whether you know the language or not. So they gave us a little army manual, this big. Où allez-vous? Où est l'hôtel de ville? Comment vous appelez-vous? And with that, I was supposed to capture a German spy wearing a pork pie hat on the narrow roads of Normandy before Patton got there, by the way. This was in the 1st Army Division. And I had to interpret for 2 British officers who were liaison to us. Now, fortunately, they were not regular officers. They were London bobbies, sergeants on the London police force. They'd been through the Blitz. Now they wanted to see action, quote, overseas, 20 miles across the channel. So they weren't regular and were very human and not academically military. So I had to interpret for them, and they knew how much French I knew, which was really nothing, except that we had 5 lessons on the grass at Schiff in England before we got on the boat to cross the channel. And they had the same 5 lessons, but they had no ear for language like I had for music and language, and they had no experience of learning a previous language. And I had done it 3 languages, because as a kid I was learning Hebrew also. So anyway, they were very patient. When one of the first towns we came to, Roncy, R-O-N-C-Y, in Normandy, the Germans were retreating. All you had to do was go in the woods and shoot a gun, and they'd come running out of the woods. But and then they were penned up, by the way. If you know these little houses in England, row houses, there's a little garden front. Well, this was the same thing, only these were stone houses and iron gates. And I remember one fellow cried out at us, he might have been 20 years old, German soldier. Only don't in German. You see, if I'd see a fire hose in the gutter of a town, I'd ask what that is in French. They spelled it for me, tuyau, T-U-Y-A-U-X, and I had by then a big military dictionary. So I looked it up and I was able to carry on. And since I had to talk to everybody, the firefighters, the gendarmes, the mayors, the bankers, in the art world, I got a lot of experience in all these different areas. So when you have to do something, it's amazing what you can do. But, you know,
Let me just show you guys a little bit about, so at some point in time, Frank was ready to turn loose of his programs, because we need Frank's programs so that we can organize. We have an EAD, a nascent EAD up online, but it's not visible right now. And part of the reason is that Frank still has a lot of material that's going to come our direction, so we haven't fully described what the series are going to be. But I want to give you some example. We went out and, because Frank was ready to turn loose of his programs, and so we went and it was a double file cabinet full of programs, plus a couple more boxes. And we've given Frank back the duplicates. This shelf and this shelf represent just single programs that Frank has played. And what, you're missing 3. Right?
Yeah, because I gave them to Phyllis Rappaport and Kalamazoo, and I didn't keep track of which they were. I know one of them, but I don't know the other 2.
So
they're chronologically arranged.
Yeah. So for his entire career, we're missing only 3 concert programs. Okay. Down here, this is his letter file. Those 3 shelves are the letter file, and this is like the biggies, right? So the Andre Jolivet is, well, it's about ½ an inch thick, I think.
Well, I have a lot of correspondence with
Yeah, a lot of correspondence with Jolivet. Virtually everyone you can imagine is represented in here. Some of the stuff that Frank gave us, he gave me a Copeland, you know, it had never been cracked, right? So Frank gave us the Copeland, and when I had Lubrano appraise the scores that he gave us, you know, I gave Frank the thing, and he was looking over the list and said, I didn't know that Copeland had signed that, and it's got this letter to Frank at the top of the thing that he'd never seen, because he just figured Copeland wanted him to spin through it. Now, which Copeland did you premiere, Frank?
Oh, the variations. I first met him in 1935 when I was 20 and he was 35. And he came to my apartment, and I wanted to play it for him. And what I didn't remember, though, but I know I found it in my diary just the other day, and a friend of mine who was going to Harvard, he came with me once to Copeland's place, and I didn't remember that. And he said to me that, you said to Copeland, why didn't you write that legato? And Copeland's answer was, because I'm not that good a pianist that I can play it legato. But I did play it twice again for him, once at Carnegie Hall. When I played my first concert at Carnegie Hall, 1949, he came. And then when he did the premiere at Dunbar and Oaks of his nonet for strings, he had asked William Marcellus to play on the same program a Baroque piece along with his variations. But William Marcellus had engaged Ben Weber, not Ben Weber, William Marcellus had received a grant to commission, from the Ford Foundation, to commission a composer to write a concerto, as was done with other pianists and composers. And he commissioned Ben Weber to write a piece, and he hurt his thumb practicing it so much. So I was in Florida playing, and I got a call from my wife. Copeland's trying to reach you. Could you play at Dunbar and Oaks in a few days and play his variations and a Baroque piece? Well, I played a Handel Chaconne and his variations. But he was listening at the backstage, and as soon as I came off, he said, "Boy, was that fast." I said, "Well, maybe I played it in 9.5 minutes, but you said in your score the performance time is 10 minutes. He said, "Did I?" I put it in the score. He didn't remember. And I felt better about it because when I recorded it, it took me 11 minutes. And that took me 11 minutes because I was playing on a rebuilt piano that had a very resistant action, and I had to be accurate with everything, you see. So I took a little more time. I said, "You make me feel better about my recording of it now, because I did take more time." He said, "Well, the older I get, the slower I like it to be." partly that's because he wrote it also, which I didn't know at the time, as a piece for wind instruments called statements. And of course, on a trombone, you go, It takes time and it has certain character. On the piano, it might be very dull. There's no particular color in it. So when I played it at Carnegie Hall, they had a great success because as the variations progressed, I think I got them rolling faster and faster. And it was almost too brilliant. Copeland was in the box next to my wife, and he stood up to bow for the tremendous applause was given. And he says, "Did I write that piece?" Now, that could be taken two ways. He said, "Oh, I didn't know it was that good," or that's not the piece I wrote. I told my wife, I think it was his version of it. She said, "No, I think he really liked it." Well, anyway, that's going to be the third time. But as I say, he said, I said, "Oh, what if I played it 9.5?" And you said 10. Did I say 10? It's printed right in the music store, the second edition of it, by the way.
So, well, I've reached the end of the pictures that I've taken here. I ran into the archive this morning. That's why we got here a little later. I ran into the archive with the 5,000 and was shooting like this madly this morning. But, let me just say a couple of the other things that we're looking forward to. Frank still has every one of his appointment books going back to what, like 1940?
1948, I think.
Yeah, 1948. So that's going to also give us a more complete picture of a composer's career than any I've ever seen. And so we're eagerly anticipating those. We have a photograph collection that came with this. We have the kinescopes of Frank's television show that he used to have. And that was what it is.
Can you play them back?
Well, we're going to send those, just like your sound recordings, we're going to send those off to Washington, D.C. and have those transcribed because they are much too precious. But he was doing music appreciation on television in 1950 what?
Yeah, but we didn't use that word at all, music appreciation.
Yeah.
No, this was a show, I did it 49 times in prime time, not public broadcast. Sponsored by the biggest laundry in Wisconsin. And we did this in Milwaukee on an NBC affiliate station. The reason I got involved in it is that when I played in Alaska in 1955 on a tour, my wife was with me, and one of the requirements of the contract was that you had to say at least one sentence about each piece before you played it. And I did that. And my wife, being in the audience, said, I noticed that when you talk about the music, people are engaged more in your performance. And she said, you'd be good on television. Now, my wife was always right, but I almost always demurred a little at first. I said, now wait a minute. It's one thing to say one sentence about a piece, another thing to hold interest in primetime television, classical music for 15 or 20 minutes, and because it wasn't being done. And she said, but you could do it. Well, she made without my knowing about it, but with a friend in Milwaukee who was a patent attorney and with the manager of the station there, that I should meet the station manager. But I didn't know that till we got to Milwaukee, where I went to see my family. So we met the station manager and he said, well, what would you do? I said, well, I would talk about music from a human interest point of view, not from academia. And he said, well, if it's worth it for you to fly back from New York to Milwaukee every week, we'll give you the free time, but we can't pay you for it. We don't have that in the budget. So before I could even decide on that, he said, oh, by the way, there's a laundry across the street. It's the biggest one in Wisconsin. And they have a show they're not happy with. It's called Playhouse 15. It's a movie made by Music Corporation of America and introduced by, I think, Douglas Fairbanks Jr. So then why don't I have you meet them and tell him the idea. It happened also that there was a television program at 1 o'clock called The Man Next Door, and I was invited to be interviewed on that. And so the station manager told the president of the laundry to watch me being interviewed. on this station. And he wanted me to come across to meet him after that. So as we were walking across the street, my wife says to me, now, what if he says he wants to start next week? I said, Ruth, he won't ask me to start next week because new shows start in September. This is July. So we went across the street. I met the president of the company. He said, what would you do? I said, well, I told him the same thing. I would do it from a human interest standpoint, but not from an academic standpoint, to interest people in music. And he said, well, I'd be willing to give it a try 3 times, once every other week. I don't care if you don't increase the our audience, but I sure would hate to have them turn it off because of what you're doing. You can play one piece or as many pieces. You're going to have 11 minutes, uninterrupted. The other 4 minutes are opening and closing and advertising. So I said, well, when would you like to start? He said, how about next week? I said, well, I didn't know what I'd say or what I'd play. I said, give me 2 weeks. So we went back to New York. And I thought, well, it would be probably best to start out with what Eddie Duchin in this wonderful orchestra had made famous, the E-flat Nocturne, Opus 9, number 2. And so everybody knew that. It was so beautiful. So I would play that as the first piece. Also because it had a wonderful story connected with it, in that when Chopin first met Schumann, after Schumann had proclaimed Chopin, hats off, gentleman, a genius, and they met at 25 years of age. What did this one genius play for Schumann? The E-flat Nocturne. He played other things we're not sure about, but we're sure about that. So I told the story about these 2 geniuses and all that. And so then I thought, what shall I do with it now? Because I need another piece. And I could talk as much as I wanted to, but it had first the piece had to be timed, so I know how much time I had to talk to make 11 minutes. And I decided, well, everybody knows I'm always chasing rainbows, so I wondered who was the person who did that, and what year did he do that? And I wondered whether that was the first classical piece that was put into pop song. And I found, I did some research on it, found it was 1918. And of course that has a brilliant, so it's brilliant for the camera. And they loved hearing I'm always chasing rainbows in the middle. And so people wrote in that wonderful show, but it's too short. Well, then I did it after the first show. The president said, oh, well, we're not going to get anywhere this way. We have to do it 6 times, once every week for 6 times. So we did it for 6 times, and then it went on for 49 times. After 49 weeks, after the 23rd week, United Airlines decided they'd like to have an ad on the show, and in exchange for the ad, they ferried me back and forth to New York to Milwaukee, free of charge. Well, that's how I got started, and then it had such a success, higher rating than Patti Page and Douglas Fairbanks introducing a movie on CBS. So it was written up in Variety, and as a result of that, I got onto the home show with Arlene Francis and Hugh Downs, when Hugh Downs was just starting out. And they told me I could have a segment for 10 minutes and do anything I wanted, but I had to send in a précis first about just what it was going to be. So the first one I did was Gollywog's Cakewalk. I played Debussy's Gollywog's Cakewalk. And I talked about what a gollywog was, what a cakewalk was, how Debussy got a gollywog for his daughter, and how the cakewalk dance worked. And I got a picture of that. And as a result of the cakewalk, the couple that won the prize doing the fancy steps going around the ballroom got a prize, and the prize was a cake. So that's why we say that takes the cake, you see. Well, anyway, and then I figured out, in the next program I did Andante Capriccioso, which is the second one on the Paganini list, which Horowitz made famous on a single record. That's before we had the 33 and all that. And I coupled it with the Liebestraum of Liszt. Now, the Liebestraum, people don't realize, was a song originally. And the song was a poem based on a poem written by Ferdinand Freiligrath, a German patriotic poet who had translated Longfellow's Hiawatha into German. And also the poem was not a really great poem at all, but it had a message which was great, I thought. And therefore, and then I read the poem, and then I played the Liebesraum. Well, the idea of the poem was, be careful what you say when you're talking to people, because if you say something that's hurtful, you can never take it back, you see. And you don't want to regret having hurt somebody like that, you see. So anyway, I read the whole poem, and after I played it, one woman wrote on a postcard, penny postcard at the time, to the laundry company. I was dozing on my couch when I woke to the strains of Liebesraum. I thought I was in heaven. One woman wrote, I adore, not about that, but the other program, I adore Liberace, but Mr. Glazer is on a higher level.
So gang, I think that's a lovely place to end here. And let's please.
Thank you, Frank, for coming and sharing all those stories and things. And thank you all for coming today. If anybody is still interested in the tour, you can go over there and see Tom. And we also have some refreshments in the back. So thank you.